The sound of splintering wood echoed through the marble corridors of Kensington Palace at exactly 3:47 a.m. on a cold October morning. What should have been a routine security check became the most terrifying moment in Royal Protection Officer James Mitchell's 12-year career. The screams that had pierced the night air just moments before had suddenly, inexplicably stopped. In the world of royal security, silence can be more dangerous than any alarm. Princess Charlotte, third in line to the British throne, had been experiencing what palace officials discreetly called episodes for weeks. But on this particular night, something was devastatingly different. The abrupt end to her cries for help would set in motion a chain of events that would shake the very foundations of the British royal family and expose secrets that were never meant to see the light of day.
This is the true account of those 5 critical hours that changed everything, from the perspective of the brave men and women whose job it was to protect the crown, no matter the personal cost.
Royal Protection Officer James Mitchell had been patrolling the west wing of Kensington Palace for 3 hours when the first scream cut through the silence. He immediately pressed the communication button on his collar and whispered his location to the control room. The sound had come from the direction of Princess Charlotte's private quarters, where she had been staying during her recovery from what the press had been told was a minor illness. Mitchell quickened his pace down the dimly lit corridor, his hand instinctively moving to the weapon secured at his side. The ornate paintings of previous royals seemed to watch him as he moved through the shadows, their eyes following his every step. He had walked these halls countless times, but tonight felt different. There was an energy in the air that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The palace had been unusually quiet for the past few days. Princess Charlotte, normally vibrant and full of life at 8 years old, had been withdrawn and refusing to leave her room. The official statement spoke of a stomach bug, but the royal staff whispered about something far more concerning. Night terrors, they said. Episodes where she would wake up screaming about shadows in her room and people who weren't supposed to be there. Margaret Thornfield, the royal family's private physician, had been visiting daily. She carried herself with the typical confidence of someone who had spent decades treating the most powerful people in Britain. But even she seemed unsettled by Charlotte's condition. Mitchell had overheard conversations between Dr. Thornfield and the palace's head of security, discussing the need for additional monitoring and the possibility of moving Charlotte to a different location within the palace. As Mitchell approached the turn that would lead him to Charlotte's wing, another scream echoed through the corridors. This one was different, more desperate, more terrified. He broke into a run, his heavy boots making soft thuds against the carpeted floor. The sound seemed to bounce off the walls, creating an eerie echo that followed him as he moved. The princess's wing was normally guarded by Officer Sarah Chen, a dedicated protection officer who had been specifically assigned to Charlotte's detail 6 months earlier. Chen was known for her attention to detail and her ability to remain calm under pressure. She had served in the military before joining the Royal Protection Unit and had never shown any signs of being rattled by her responsibilities. But when Mitchell rounded the corner, he found Chen standing frozen outside Charlotte's bedroom door. Her face was pale, and her hand was pressed against her ear as if she was straining to hear something. She looked up as Mitchell approached, and he could see the concern written across her features. "How long has this been going on?" Mitchell asked in a low voice, positioning himself next to Chen outside the heavy wooden door. "About 20 minutes, Chen replied, never taking her eyes off the door. It started with quiet whimpering, then escalated to full screams. "But James, there's something else. I can hear voices in there. Multiple voices." Mitchell felt a chill run down his spine. The princess was supposed to be alone in her room. Royal protocol dictated that no one was permitted into private quarters without explicit authorization, especially during the overnight hours. Even the cleaning staff required special clearance and supervision. The 2 officers exchanged glances, both thinking the same thing, but neither wanting to voice it aloud. If there were unauthorized individuals in the princess's room, it represented a massive security breach, the kind of breach that could end careers and, more importantly, could put Charlotte's life in danger. Chen pulled out her radio and contacted the control room. "Control, this is Officer Chen. We have a potential code red situation in the West Wing, requesting immediate backup and supervisor presence." The response was immediate. "Copy that, Officer Chen. Backup is en route." ETA 2 minutes. Do not engage until support arrives unless there is immediate danger to the principal. Another scream pierced the air, this one more frantic than the others. Mitchell pressed his ear to the door, trying to make out what was happening on the other side. The walls of the palace were thick, built centuries ago when privacy and security were paramount concerns for the royal family. But even through the solid wood and stone, he could hear the unmistakable sound of furniture being moved. and what sounded like someone trying to force open a window. "There's definitely someone else in there," Mitchell whispered to Chen. "And it sounds like they're trying to get out through the window." Chen's training kicked in immediately. She began mentally reviewing the layout of Charlotte's room and the security measures in place. The windows in that particular wing were fitted with specialized locks that could only be opened from the inside with a key that was kept by security. Even if someone managed to open a window, the drop to the ground below was nearly 30 feet, with no clear escape route. The backup arrived exactly when promised. Sergeant David Reynolds, the night shift supervisor, appeared with 2 additional officers. Reynolds was a veteran of the Royal Protection Service with over 20 years of experience. He had seen everything from protest infiltrators to actual assassination attempts, and his calm demeanor under pressure was legendary among the staff. "Brief me," Reynolds said quietly, taking charge of the situation immediately. Chen quickly explained what they had observed and heard. As she spoke, Reynolds studied the door and the surrounding area, noting the lack of any signs of forced entry. The security cameras in the corridor would have recorded anyone entering or leaving the area, but there had been no alerts from the monitoring station. "Has anyone contacted the duty physician?" Reynolds asked. "Dr. Thornfield is on her way," Chen replied. "ETA 15 minutes. Another scream filled the air, but this one was different. It was a scream of pure terror, the kind that makes your blood freeze and your heart skip a beat. All 4 officers tensed, their hands moving instinctively to their weapons. Reynolds made the decision that would change everything. "We're going in. Chen, you take the left side of the room. Mitchell, you're with me on the right. Thompson, you watch our backs and be ready to call for medical assistance." The team positioned themselves outside the door. Reynolds tested the handle and found it unlocked, which was unusual. Palace protocol required all doors to be secured from the inside during the night hours. The fact that it was open suggested either a security oversight or something more sinister. As Reynolds slowly pushed the door open, the screaming suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any sound they had heard all night. It was the kind of silence that seems to press against your eardrums, making you question whether you've suddenly gone deaf. The room beyond the door was dark, illuminated only by the soft glow of a nightlight plugged into the wall near Charlotte's bed. The officers could make out the shape of furniture, a writing desk, a bookshelf filled with children's books, and several chairs arranged around a small table where Charlotte often had her breakfast. But there was no sign of the princess. Reynolds signaled for the team to enter slowly. As they stepped into the room, their eyes began to adjust to the dim lighting. The bed was empty, its covers thrown back, as if someone had gotten up quickly or been pulled from it. The window on the far side of the room was closed and locked, contradicting what they thought they had heard earlier. Chen moved toward the adjoining bathroom while Mitchell checked behind the furniture and in the large wardrobe where Charlotte kept her clothes. The room appeared to be empty, but the signs of disturbance were everywhere. Books had been knocked from the bookshelf, and a small chair was overturned near the window. "Princess Charlotte?" Reynolds called softly. "It's Sergeant Reynolds. Are you here?" There was no response. Chen had reached the bathroom door and found it closed. She pressed her ear against the wood and could hear what sounded like quiet sobbing coming from inside. She looked back at Reynolds and nodded, indicating that she had found something. The bathroom door was locked from the inside. Chen knocked gently and called out, "Princess Charlotte, it's Officer Chen. Are you okay? Can you open the door for us?" The sobbing stopped immediately, replaced once again by that terrifying silence. Reynolds approached the door and tried the handle himself. The lock was engaged, but these were not the heavy-duty security locks found on the main doors of the palace. This was a simple privacy lock that could be opened with the right tool or enough force. "Princess, we're here to help you," Reynolds said in his calmest voice. "No one is going to hurt you. Can you tell us if you're okay?" Still no response. The team waited for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. They could hear Dr. Thornfield's footsteps approaching in the corridor, along with what sounded like several other people. The situation was escalating, and decisions needed to be made quickly. Reynolds looked at his team. They were all thinking the same thing. If Princess Charlotte was injured or in immediate danger, they couldn't wait for permission or proper procedures. Their primary responsibility was her safety, and every second of delay could be critical. Dr. Freed. Thornfield entered the room, followed by 2 palace officials and another security officer. She immediately assessed the situation and moved toward the bathroom door. "Charlotte, sweetheart, it's Dr. Thornfield," she called out. "I need to know that you're okay. Can you say something, anything, so we know you're all right?" The silence continued. Dr. Thornfield turned to Reynolds. "How long has it been since you heard from her?" About 10 minutes since the screaming stopped, Reynolds replied. But we've been trying to get a response for the last 5 minutes with no success. The doctor's expression grew increasingly concerned. In her current state, this kind of episode could be very dangerous. She could be having a panic attack, or worse, she might have injured herself. Reynolds knew what he had to do. He had two choices. Continue trying to coax Charlotte out of the bathroom, potentially wasting precious time if she was hurt, or break down the door and risk traumatizing an already frightened child. The decision was made for him when they heard a soft thud from inside the bathroom, followed by complete silence. Dr. Thornfield looked at Reynolds with alarm. That could be her collapsing. We need to get in there now. Reynolds didn't hesitate. He stepped back from the door and prepared to force it open. Everyone stand back. I'm going to break it down. The first kick splintered the wood around the lock, but didn't fully open the door. The second kick sent the door flying open, revealing the small bathroom beyond. What they found inside would haunt every person in that room for the rest of their lives, and set in motion a chain of events that would shake the British royal family to its core. Princess Charlotte was huddled in the corner of the bathroom, pressed against the wall behind the toilet, her knees drawn up to her chest and her arms wrapped around her legs. Her face was streaked with tears, and her hair was disheveled as if she had been pulling at it. But what immediately caught everyone's attention were her eyes. They were wide open, staring at something that no one else could see, and she appeared to be completely unresponsive to their presence. Dr. Thornfield immediately knelt down beside Charlotte, speaking in the soft, reassuring tone she reserved for her youngest patients. Charlotte, sweetheart, it's okay now. You're safe. Can you hear me? The princess didn't acknowledge the doctor's presence. Her gaze remained fixed on the empty corner of the bathroom, as if she was watching something terrifying unfold there. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, and her small body was trembling uncontrollably. Reynolds quickly assessed the scene. There were no signs of physical injury that he could see, no evidence of an intruder, and no indication of how Charlotte had ended up in this state. The bathroom window was small and positioned too high for anyone to enter through, and like the bedroom window, it was secured with specialized locks. Officer Chen began documenting everything she observed, knowing that a detailed report would be required. He overturned items in the bedroom, the timing of the screams, the locked bathroom door, and now Charlotte's unresponsive state all needed to be recorded accurately. In cases involving the royal family, every detail mattered. Dr. Thornfield continued her gentle attempts to reach Charlotte. Sweetheart, I'm going to check to make sure you're not hurt, okay? Just let me know if anything feels painful. As the doctor began her examination, Charlotte suddenly spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, but in the silence of the bathroom, everyone could hear her clearly. He said he would come back, she whispered, still staring at the corner. He said next time he wouldn't let me hide. Dr. Thornfield's hands stilled. She looked up at Reynolds with an expression that made his blood run cold. In her decades of treating children, she had seen cases of trauma that resulted in this kind of disorientation and fear. But Charlotte had been living in one of the most secure locations in Britain, surrounded by protection officers and staff who had all been thoroughly vetted. Charlotte, Dr. Kuvich, Thornfield said gently. Who told you that? Who are you talking about? The man in the shadows, Charlotte replied, her voice still distant and hollow. He comes through the walls. He knows things about everyone. He showed me pictures. Reynolds felt the situation shifting from a medical emergency to something far more serious. If Charlotte was describing an actual intruder rather than experiencing some kind of hallucination, it meant that the palace's security had been compromised in ways that seemed impossible. He quietly signaled for Chen to contact the control room and request an immediate security sweep of the entire West Wing. They needed to know if there was any possibility that someone had been in the area who shouldn't have been there. Dr. Thornfield continued her examination, checking Charlotte for any signs of physical trauma or injury. The princess's pulse was elevated and her temperature was slightly high, consistent with extreme stress or fear. But there were no visible injuries, no signs that anyone had physically harmed her. Charlotte, I need you to try to focus on my voice, Dr. Thornfield said. You're in your bathroom at the palace. Sergeant Reynolds and Officer Chen are here to keep you safe. No one is going to hurt you. For the first time since they had found her, Charlotte seemed to register that other people were present. Her eyes shifted from the corner to Dr. Thornfield's face, and some awareness returned to her expression. Dr. Maggie, she whispered, using the nickname she had given the doctor years earlier. Yes, sweetheart, it's me. You're okay now. Can you tell me what happened? Charlotte's eyes filled with fresh tears. He came again, but this time he brought the box. What box? Doctor, Thornfield asked, keeping her voice calm and encouraging. The box with the pictures. He showed me pictures of Mommy and Daddy and Grandmama and you. He said he watches everyone all the time, and if I tell anyone about him, something bad will happen to all of you. Reynolds exchanged glances with Chen. If Charlotte was describing an actual threat against the royal family, this had just become a matter of national security. But if she was experiencing some kind of psychological episode, they needed to be careful not to reinforce her fears while still taking her words seriously. Dr. Thornfield helped Charlotte to her feet, supporting her as she stood on shaky legs. Let's get you back to your bed, okay? We can talk more there. As they moved from the bathroom back into the bedroom, Charlotte suddenly stopped and pointed toward the window. That's where he goes. He doesn't use the door. He comes through the wall next to the window, and when he leaves, he goes back the same way. Reynolds immediately moved to examine the wall Charlotte was indicating. It appeared completely solid, with no signs of any hidden passages or openings. The wallpaper was undisturbed, and when he pressed against the surface, it felt like solid stone underneath. But as he ran his hands along the wall, searching for anything unusual, his fingers found something that shouldn't have been there. Near the floor, hidden behind a piece of furniture that had been moved during Charlotte's episode, there was a small section where the wallpaper was slightly loose. Chen joined him in examining the area. When they carefully pulled back the loose paper, they found a narrow gap in the stonework. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, and it appeared to lead into the space between the walls. "Control, this is Reynolds," he said into his radio. "We need the palace engineer down here immediately, and get me a full architectural survey of this wing. I want to know about every passage, every maintenance area, every space between these walls." Doctor Thornfield had settled Charlotte on her bed and was sitting beside her, continuing to monitor her condition. The princess seemed more alert now, but she was still extremely agitated and kept looking toward the wall where Reynolds and Chen were working. "He's not supposed to be here," Charlotte said suddenly. "He told me the palace is supposed to be safe, but nowhere is really safe. He said he could get to anyone, anywhere, anytime he wanted." "Charlotte," Dr. Thornfield said carefully, "this man you're describing, what did he look like?" "I never saw his face clearly. He always stayed in the shadows, but he was tall and he wore dark clothes, and his voice was scary, not loud but scary." Reynolds was becoming increasingly convinced that Charlotte's descriptions were not the product of nightmares or hallucinations. The gap in the wall was real, and it appeared to connect to a network of spaces that existed within the palace's structure. If someone had discovered how to access these areas, they could potentially move throughout the building without being detected by the normal security measures. The palace engineer arrived within 10 minutes, looking flustered and concerned. Robert MacLeod had been responsible for maintaining the physical structure of Kensington Palace for 15 years. He knew every pipe, every wire, and every architectural detail of the building. "Sergeant Reynolds, what exactly have you found?" MacLeod asked, approaching the wall where the gap had been discovered. Reynolds explained the situation and showed MacLeod the opening. The engineer's expression grew increasingly troubled as he examined the area. "This shouldn't exist," MacLeod said finally. "According to all the architectural plans, this should be solid wall. But it looks like someone has carefully removed sections of the inner stonework to create a passage." "How long would something like this take to create?" Reynolds asked. "With the right tools and knowledge of the building's structure?" "Probably several weeks of careful work, but it would have to be done during times when this area wasn't occupied, and the person would need to dispose of a significant amount of stone debris without being noticed." Chen was taking photographs of everything, documenting the discovery for the investigation that would inevitably follow. "Is it possible that this connects to other parts of the building?" MacLeod was already pulling out his phone to access the digital architectural plans. "If someone has been modifying the structure in this way, there's no telling how extensive the alterations might be. We need to do a complete survey of the entire palace." Dr. Thornfield looked up from Charlotte, who had finally fallen into an exhausted sleep. "Sergeant, I need to speak with you privately." Reynolds followed the doctor out into the corridor, leaving Chen and MacLeod to continue their examination of the wall. "What Charlotte described tonight is consistent with prolonged psychological trauma, Dr. Grace," Thornfield said quietly. "The level of detail in her accounts, the specific nature of her fears, and her physical responses all suggest that she has been experiencing genuine threats for some time." "You think someone has actually been accessing her room?" "I think we need to consider that possibility very seriously." Children Charlotte's age don't typically invent elaborate scenarios involving photographs and specific threats. And the discovery of that passage makes her accounts much more credible. Reynolds nodded grimly. We'll need to move her to a secure location immediately and begin a full investigation. If someone has been able to access the royal quarters undetected, we're dealing with a security breach of unprecedented proportions. There's something else. Doctor, Thornfield added. Charlotte mentioned that this person showed her pictures of family members and palace staff. If that's true, it suggests surveillance capabilities that go far beyond simple intrusion. The implications were staggering. If an unknown individual had been conducting surveillance on the royal family and had somehow gained access to their private quarters, it represented not just a security failure, but a potential threat to the stability of the monarchy itself. Reynolds returned to Charlotte's room to find MacLeod emerging from the gap in the wall, covered in dust and looking deeply concerned. Sergeant, you need to see this, MacLeod said. The passage extends much further than we initially thought.
It appears to connect to a network of maintenance tunnels that run throughout this section of the palace. How is that possible? Wouldn't those tunnels be on the architectural plans?
They should be, but some of what I found in there has been modified recently.
Someone with extensive knowledge of the building's structure has been making changes to create a hidden route through the palace. Chen had been monitoring the security feeds from the control room and had just received an update. Sergeant, I've got the overnight footage from the corridor cameras. There's something you need to see. She showed him her tablet, which displayed the security feed from the hallway outside Charlotte's room. The timestamp showed approximately 30 minutes before the first scream was heard. Watch this, Chen said, pointing to the screen. In the grainy black and white footage, they could see the empty corridor. Then, for just a few seconds, a shadow appeared to move along the wall near Charlotte's door. It was brief and could have been dismissed as a camera glitch, but knowing what they now knew about the hidden passages, it took on a much more sinister meaning. Can we enhance this footage? Reynolds asked. I've already sent it to the technical team. But Sergeant, there's more. I've been reviewing the feeds from the past 2 weeks, and there are similar anomalies on several different nights. Always around the same time. Always in the same general area. Reynolds felt a cold dread settling in his stomach. If Charlotte had been experiencing these intrusions for weeks, it meant that the security breach was far more serious than they had initially realized. It also meant that whoever was responsible had been studying the palace's routines and security procedures for an extended period. Doctor, Thornfield rejoined them, having just finished a phone call. I've contacted the Child Protection Unit at Scotland Yard. Given the nature of Charlotte's statements and the evidence you've uncovered, they want to conduct their own investigation. What's our next step? Chen asked. Reynolds considered the options. They needed to ensure Charlotte's immediate safety while preserving the evidence they had discovered. They also needed to determine the extent of the security breach and identify who was responsible. First, we moved Charlotte to the secure wing of Clarence House. That location has updated security systems and no architectural features that could be exploited. Second, we seal off this entire area and begin a forensic examination of everything. Third, we need to brief the Royal Protection Command immediately. As if summoned by his words, Reynolds' radio crackled to life. Sergeant Reynolds, this is Command. We need you to report to the security center immediately. The situation has just become much more complex. Reynolds looked around at his team. In the space of a few hours, what had begun as a routine response to a child's nightmares had evolved into a major security incident, with implications that extended far beyond the palace walls. Charlotte stirred in her sleep and whimpered softly. Even unconscious, she seemed to sense the danger that had been lurking in the shadows of her home. The investigation was just beginning, but already it was clear that nothing would ever be the same. The security center at Kensington Palace had been transformed into what looked like a war room. Multiple screens displayed camera feeds from throughout the building, architectural plans covered every available surface, and representatives from Scotland Yard, MI5, and the Royal Protection Command filled the chairs around the central table. The atmosphere was tense, with the kind of focused urgency that only emerged during genuine crises.
Commander Sarah Williams of the Royal Protection Command stood at the head of the table, her expression grim.
She had served in various security roles for over 25 years and had never encountered anything quite like this situation.
The implications of what had been discovered in Charlotte's room threatened to undermine the fundamental assumptions upon which royal security operated. Gentlemen, Dr. Thornfield. Commander Williams began as Reynolds entered the room. What we're dealing with here is potentially the most serious security breach in the modern history of the royal family. I need everyone to understand that from this moment forward, we're operating under the assumption that all previous security protocols may have been compromised. Detective Inspector Maria Santos from Scotland Yard's Specialist Protection Unit had been studying the preliminary reports. She was known for her methodical approach to complex investigations and her ability to see patterns that others missed. Sergeant Reynolds, DI Santos said, "Walk us through exactly what happened tonight from your perspective. Don't leave out any details, no matter how insignificant they might seem." Reynolds provided a comprehensive account of the evening's events, from the initial screams to the discovery of the hidden passage. As he spoke, several people in the room took notes, and others studied the photographs that Chen had taken of the modified wall structure. Thornfield added her observations about Charlotte's condition and behavior. What's particularly concerning is that the princess described details about surveillance activities that a child her age wouldn't typically be able to invent. The specificity of her account suggests that she has been exposed to genuine threats. Agent David Park from MI5 had been quietly reviewing security protocols on his laptop. He looked up as Dr. Thornfield finished speaking. "We've been analyzing the architectural modifications that were discovered. The level of sophistication required to create those passages without detection suggests someone with extensive knowledge of both the palace's structure and its security systems." Commander Williams activated a large screen that displayed the palace's floor plan. Red lines had been overlaid to show the suspected route of the hidden passages. Based on the initial survey conducted by Mr. McLeod, we believe the modifications may extend through approximately 30% of the West Wing. The passages appear to connect to legitimate maintenance areas, which would have provided cover for someone working within the structure. Reynolds studied the diagram.
How long would it have taken to create something like this? According to our engineering consultants, anywhere from 6 months to a year, depending on how frequently the work was conducted, Agent Park replied. But here's what's most troubling. The work was done with a level of precision that suggests architectural training. DI Santos spread several photographs across the table.
They showed close-up images of the stonework modifications, tool marks on the walls, and samples of debris that had been found within the passages. "We've sent samples for forensic analysis, but the preliminary examination suggests that whoever did this work was careful to avoid leaving fingerprints or other identifiable evidence. However, we did find something interesting." She produced a small plastic evidence bag containing what appeared to be a fragment of fabric. This was snagged on a rough edge of stone about 20 feet inside the passage. It's a wool blend that's commonly used in high-end clothing. Not exactly what you'd expect someone to wear while doing construction work. Dr. Thornfield looked troubled. This suggests that whoever created these passages was also using them regularly.
If Charlotte's accounts are accurate, this person has been accessing her room repeatedly over an extended period.
Commander Williams activated another screen, this one showing security camera footage from various locations throughout the palace over the past month.
"We've been reviewing surveillance footage systematically, looking for any anomalies or unexplained incidents. What we've found is disturbing." The screen showed a compilation of brief clips, each time-stamped from different dates and times. In each clip, shadows or movement could be detected in areas where no authorized personnel should have been present. These incidents occurred on 12 different occasions over the past 6 weeks. They all took place during the overnight hours, and they all involved areas near the royal family's private quarters. Agent Park leaned forward, studying the footage. This level of surveillance activity suggests a high degree of planning and patience. Whoever is responsible has been studying the palace's routines and security procedures for months. Reynolds felt a chill as he realized the full implications. If this person has been accessing the royal quarters regularly, they would have had opportunities to gather intelligence on the family's activities, schedules, and security arrangements.
Exactly, Commander Williams confirmed.
Which is why we're treating this as a potential national security threat. The information that could have been gathered during these intrusions could be valuable to hostile foreign governments or terrorist organizations. DI Santos had been reviewing Charlotte's statements as recorded by Dr. Thornfield. The princess mentioned that this person showed her photographs. If those photographs exist, they could provide crucial evidence about the scope of the surveillance activities. Charlotte described seeing pictures of family members and palace staff, Dr. Thornfield added. She was very specific about this detail, which lends credibility to her account. Mr. McLeod, the palace engineer, entered the room carrying a tablet and looking extremely concerned. He had spent the past several hours conducting a detailed survey of the hidden passages. "Commander Williams, I've completed the preliminary survey. The situation is worse than we initially thought." He activated his tablet and projected its contents onto the main screen. The image showed a complex three-dimensional map of the palace's structure, with the discovered passages highlighted in red. The modifications extend throughout the entire West Wing and into portions of the central structure. The person responsible has created a network that would allow access to virtually every major area of the palace, including the private quarters of all the senior royals. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of this revelation. If the passages provided access to other royal quarters, it meant that the security breach potentially affected not just Charlotte, but the entire royal family. Agent Park was the first to speak. We need to immediately evacuate all family members from the affected areas and conduct a comprehensive security sweep of every accessible location. Commander Williams nodded. That process is already underway. The royal family has been temporarily relocated to secure facilities while we assess the full extent of the compromise. D.I. Santos was studying the passage map. Mr. McLeod, these passages appear to connect to external areas of the building. Is it possible that someone could access them from outside the palace? Unfortunately, yes, McLeod replied. The network connects to several legitimate maintenance areas that have external access points. Someone with the right knowledge could potentially enter and exit the building without passing through any of the normal security checkpoints. Dr. Thornfield looked around the table. This explains why Charlotte has been experiencing increasing anxiety over the past few weeks. If she was being subjected to regular intrusions and threats, her psychological state would naturally deteriorate. Reynolds had been thinking about the timeline of events. We need to consider the possibility that tonight's incident was different from the previous ones. Charlotte's reaction was more extreme, and she specifically mentioned that the person brought the box this time. What kind of box? Agent Park asked. According to Charlotte, it contained photographs, but she also said that the person threatened her more explicitly tonight, warning her about what would happen if she told anyone about the intrusions. Commander Williams looked troubled. That suggests an escalation in the situation. If this person felt that Charlotte might be reaching a point where she would report the intrusions, they might have decided to increase the psychological pressure. D.I. Santos made a note on her pad. We need to consider the possibility that this escalation indicates the person is preparing to act on whatever intelligence they've gathered. The increased threats against Charlotte could be a sign that they're nearing the end of their surveillance phase. The implications were terrifying. If someone had been gathering intelligence on the royal family for months and was now escalating their activities, it suggested that a larger operation might be in motion. Agent Park's phone buzzed, and he answered it quietly. After a brief conversation, he looked up at the group with a grave expression. We've just received intelligence that suggests this incident may be connected to a broader security concern. There have been similar intrusion attempts at other government facilities over the past few months. Commander Williams stood up straight. What kind of facilities? Military installations, government offices, and diplomatic residences. In each case, the intrusions involve sophisticated knowledge of building structures and security systems. Until now, we thought they were isolated incidents. Dr. Thornfield felt a cold dread settling in her stomach. Are you suggesting that this is part of a coordinated intelligence operation? That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Agent Park replied. And if that's the case, Princess Charlotte may have been targeted not just because she was vulnerable, but because someone believed they could gather intelligence about the royal family's security arrangements through her. Reynolds thought about Charlotte's descriptions of the photographs and the threats. A child would be seen as less likely to report intrusions, especially if they were frightened into silence. Someone could have been using her as an unwitting source of information about palace routines and security procedures. The room erupted in quiet conversations as the implications sank in. What had begun as a response to a child's nightmares had evolved into a potential national security crisis involving foreign intelligence operations. Commander Williams called for attention. We need to move quickly. If this is part of a larger operation, we have to assume that our investigation may trigger countermeasures from whoever is responsible. D.I. Santos was already organizing her notes. We need to conduct interviews with all palace staff who had access to the affected areas over the past year. Someone had to provide the architectural information and security details that would have been necessary to create those passages. Agent Park nodded. MI5 will coordinate with international intelligence partners to determine if similar operations have been detected in other countries. This level of sophistication suggests state-sponsored activity. Dr. Thornfield looked around the table. What about Charlotte? She's been traumatized by this experience, and she may have information that could be crucial to the investigation. She'll be interviewed by specialists from the Child Protection Unit, D.I. Santos replied. But we need to balance the need for information with her psychological well-being. Commander Williams began issuing orders. I want every member of the palace staff questioned about any unusual activities they may have observed. I want a complete forensic examination of the passage network. And I want a full review of all security protocols for the past 2 years. As the meeting broke up and various teams began their assigned tasks, Reynolds remained behind with Dr. Thornfield. Doctor, how do you think Charlotte will handle all of this? Dr. Thornfield considered the question carefully. Children are often more resilient than we expect, but she's been under psychological pressure for weeks. The most important thing now is ensuring that she feels safe and that she understands that the adults around her are taking her seriously. Reynolds nodded. And if this investigation leads where I think it might, she may end up being one of the most important witnesses in a case involving national security, which is why we need to proceed very carefully, Dr. Thornfield replied. Charlotte is just 8 years old. Whatever we discover in this investigation, we can't lose sight of the fact that she's been the victim in all of this. As they prepared to leave the security center, both of them knew that the next few days would determine not just the outcome of the investigation, but potentially the safety of the entire royal family. The hidden passages had been discovered, but the person who created them was still out there, somewhere in the shadows, with knowledge and capabilities that posed an unprecedented threat to the crown. 3 days after the discovery of the hidden passages, the investigation had expanded into one of the most complex security operations in British history. A joint task force comprising representatives from Scotland Yard, MI5, MI6, and the Royal Protection Command had been established, operating out of a secure facility in central London. The scale of the operation reflected the growing realization that they were dealing with something far more sophisticated than an isolated security breach. Detective Inspector Maria Santos had barely slept since the investigation began. The evidence that had emerged over the past 72 hours painted a picture of an intelligence operation that was both audacious in its scope and terrifying in its implications. She stood before a wall covered with photographs, architectural plans, surveillance footage, and detailed timelines, trying to piece together a puzzle that seemed to grow more complex with each new discovery. The forensic examination of the hidden passages had revealed evidence of regular use over an extended period. Dust patterns, wear marks on the stone surfaces, and traces of fabric fibers indicated that someone had been traversing the network frequently for at least 6 months. More disturbing was the discovery of small electronic devices embedded in the walls at various points throughout the passage system. Agent David Park from MI5 entered the investigation room carrying a folder of classified documents. His expression was grave as he approached the evidence wall where D.I. Santos was working. Maria, we've received the analysis of those electronic devices we found in the passages. You're not going to like this. He opened the folder and spread several photographs across the table. The images showed tiny listening devices and miniature cameras, each no larger than a coin and designed to be virtually undetectable. These are sophisticated surveillance devices definitely not available to the general public. The technology suggests military or intelligence-grade equipment. Whoever planted these had access to resources that go far beyond what a typical criminal organization could obtain. D.I. Santos studied the photographs. How many devices did we find in total? 17 listening devices and 12 cameras, positioned throughout the passage network to provide comprehensive surveillance coverage of the royal family's private areas. The placement suggests detailed knowledge of the palace's daily routines and security procedures. The implications were staggering. If these devices had been operational for months, it meant that virtually every private conversation and activity involving the royal family had potentially been monitored and recorded. Commander Sarah Williams entered the room, followed by Dr. Thornfield and several other members of the investigation team. She looked exhausted, having spent the past 3 days coordinating security arrangements while the royal family remained in protective custody. What's our current status? Commander Williams asked, taking a seat at the conference table. Agent Park provided a briefing on the latest discoveries. As he described the surveillance devices and their capabilities, Dr. Thornfield's expression grew increasingly concerned. If Princess Charlotte was exposed to this level of surveillance for months, it explains the severity of her psychological symptoms. The person responsible wasn't just intruding into her room. They were essentially holding her captive in her own home through fear and intimidation. D.I. Santos activated a laptop and projected its contents onto the wall screen. The display showed a detailed timeline of all known incidents, cross-referenced with palace schedules and security protocols. We've been analyzing the pattern of intrusions, and something interesting has emerged. The incidents appear to coincide with periods when the royal family was discussing sensitive security matters or making important decisions. She clicked through several entries on the timeline, each marked with specific dates and descriptions of royal family activities. For example, on September the 15th, there was an intrusion the night before Prince William was scheduled to meet with intelligence officials about updated security protocols. On October 3rd, an incident occurred just before Princess Catherine's trip to a classified location was finalized. Commander Williams leaned forward, studying the timeline. Are you suggesting that these intrusions were timed to gather intelligence about upcoming security arrangements? That's exactly what I'm suggesting. Whoever is responsible appears to have had advanced knowledge of the royal family's schedule and was targeting specific information that would be valuable for planning future operations. Agent Park had been reviewing classified intelligence reports on his secure tablet. This is consistent with what we're seeing in the broader investigation. We've identified similar surveillance activities at military installations and government facilities, all timed to coincide with sensitive meetings or decision-making processes. Dr. Thornfield was deeply troubled by these revelations. Charlotte mentioned that the person showed her photographs and made threats about what would happen to family members. If they were gathering intelligence about security arrangements, those threats may have been more specific than we initially realized. D.I. Santos nodded. We need to conduct a detailed interview with Charlotte to determine exactly what information this person may have tried to extract from her. Children often remember more details than adults expect, especially in traumatic situations. The secure phone in the center of the table rang, and Commander Williams answered it. After a brief conversation, she looked around the room with a mixture of relief and apprehension. That was the Child Protection Unit. They've completed their initial assessment of Charlotte's condition, and she's ready to provide a formal statement. But they want to ensure that the interview is conducted with appropriate psychological support. Dr. Thornfield stood up immediately. I should be present for that interview. Charlotte trusts me, and having a familiar face there will help her feel more comfortable. Agreed, D.I. Santos said. But we need to be prepared for the possibility that what Charlotte tells us could significantly expand the scope of this investigation. Agent Park was studying intelligence reports on his tablet. Before we conduct that interview, there's something else you all need to know. We've received information from our international partners that suggests this operation may have connections to foreign intelligence services. The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications of this statement. What kind of connections? Commander Williams asked. Similar surveillance activities have been detected in other countries over the past year. Government facilities in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand have all reported incidents involving sophisticated intrusion techniques and advanced surveillance equipment. The common factor in all cases is targeting of information related to security arrangements for high-profile officials. D.I. Santos felt a chill run down her spine. Are you suggesting that this is part of a coordinated international intelligence operation? That's the working theory. The level of sophistication, the consistency of techniques across different countries, and the focus on security intelligence all point to state-sponsored activity. Dr. Thornfield looked around the room. If this is true, then Charlotte wasn't just the victim of a random intrusion. She was deliberately targeted as part of a larger operation designed to compromise the security of multiple governments. Commander Williams began pacing, her mind working through the implications. We need to consider the possibility that this operation is still ongoing. If the perpetrators realize that we've discovered their surveillance network, they may accelerate whatever plans they have. Agent Park's secure phone buzzed, and he answered it quietly. After a brief conversation, he looked up at the group with alarm. We may have a more immediate problem. Intelligence sources are reporting unusual activity at several diplomatic facilities in London. There are indications that foreign intelligence operatives may be preparing to evacuate the country. D.I. Santos grabbed her jacket. If they're preparing to leave, it could mean that they've completed their intelligence gathering and are moving to the operational phase of whatever they're planning. Or it could mean that they know we're onto them, and they're trying to escape before we can identify and apprehend them, Commander Williams added.
Dr. XX, sir.
Thornfield was already heading toward the door. We need to get Charlotte's statement immediately. If these people are preparing to leave the country, whatever information she has could be our last opportunity to prevent them from using what they've learned. The team quickly organized for an emergency interview session. The Child Protection Unit had prepared a secure facility designed to make children feel comfortable while providing the necessary security for sensitive interviews. Charlotte had been staying there with a guardian since being moved from the palace, and child psychologists had been working with her to help process the traumatic experiences she had endured. As they drove through London toward the secure facility, D.I. Santos reviewed her notes on what they already knew from Charlotte's initial statements. The 8-year-old princess had provided remarkably detailed accounts of her encounters with the intruder, including descriptions of photographs she had been shown and specific threats that had been made. "We need to approach this carefully," Dr. Thornfield warned as they arrived at the facility. "Charlotte has been through tremendous trauma, and pushing her too hard could cause psychological damage that might never heal." Agent Park nodded. "But we also need to remember that the information she provides could be crucial for preventing a potential attack on the royal family or other government officials." The interview room had been designed to look more like a comfortable living room than an interrogation facility. Soft furniture, warm lighting, and toys had been arranged to help children feel at ease. Charlotte was waiting with her child advocate, a specialist trained in helping young witnesses provide testimony in sensitive cases. When Charlotte saw Dr. Barr, Thornfield entered the room, her face lit up with the first genuine smile anyone had seen from her since the incident at the palace. She immediately ran to the doctor and hugged her tightly. "Dr. Maggie, I'm so glad you're here. I've been scared that the Shadow Man might come here too." Dr. Thornfield knelt down to Charlotte's level. "Sweetheart, you're completely safe here. There are lots of people whose job it is to protect you, and the Shadow Man can't get into this building." D.I. Santos and Agent Park introduced themselves to Charlotte in the gentlest terms possible, explaining that they were there to help catch the person who had been frightening her. Charlotte seemed to understand the seriousness of the situation, but she also appeared relieved that adults were finally taking her experiences seriously. "Charlotte," D.I. Santos began, "can you tell us about the pictures that the Shadow Man showed you? Do you remember what was in those pictures?" Charlotte nodded solemnly. "There were lots of pictures. Pictures of Mummy and Daddy and Grandmama and Uncle Harry. But there were also pictures of places I'd never seen before." "What kind of places?" "Doctor," Thornfield asked gently. "Big buildings with lots of windows, and pictures of people in uniforms. The Shadow Man said these were places where important people work, and that he could visit those places too if he wanted to." Agent Park exchanged glances with D.I. Santos. If Charlotte's description was accurate, it suggested that the surveillance operation extended beyond the royal family to include other government facilities and officials. "Charlotte, did the Shadow Man ever ask you to do anything for him?" D.I. Santos asked. "He asked me questions about when Mummy and Daddy go to their meetings and when the security people change shifts. He said if I answered his questions, he wouldn't hurt anyone. But if I didn't answer, or if I told anyone about him, something bad would happen to the people I love." Doctor. Thornfield felt her heart break for the child. An 8-year-old had been essentially recruited as an unwilling intelligence asset through threats and intimidation. The psychological manipulation involved was sophisticated and cruel. "What kind of questions did he ask?" Agent Park inquired carefully. "He wanted to know about the cars that come to pick up Mummy and Daddy, and about the different doors they use when they leave the palace. He asked about the people who bring food and clean the rooms. And he asked about the special meetings when extra security people come." D.I. Santos realized that Charlotte had been subjected to systematic interrogation designed to map the royal family's security arrangements. A child's observations might seem innocent, but in the hands of trained intelligence operatives, such information could be used to plan devastating attacks. "Charlotte, this is very important," D.I. Santos said. "Did the Shadow Man ever tell you his name or say anything about where he came from?" Charlotte thought for a moment.
"He never told me his name."
"But sometimes when he was looking at the pictures, he would say words I didn't understand. They sounded like they might be in a different language." "Can you remember any of those words?" Charlotte closed her eyes, concentrating. "He said something that sounded like Zardanyai a lot. And sometimes he said Selavoy when he was looking at pictures of Daddy." Agent Park's expression changed immediately. Both words were Russian, and they had very specific meanings in intelligence terminology. Zadanie meant assignment or mission, and Selavoy meant target. The investigation had just taken a dramatic turn toward international espionage, and Charlotte had unknowingly provided evidence that could help identify the foreign power responsible for the operation. The revelation that Charlotte had overheard Russian words during her encounters with the intruder transformed the investigation from a domestic security matter into an international incident. Within hours of her interview, representatives from the Foreign Office, the Defense Intelligence Staff, and senior officials from MI6 had joined the task force. The secure facility in central London had become the nerve center for an operation that now involved multiple government agencies and international intelligence partners. Agent David Park had spent the night coordinating with Russian intelligence specialists, trying to piece together the significance of the words Charlotte had remembered. The terms she had heard were not casual Russian vocabulary. They were specific operational terminology used by intelligence services, indicating that the person who had been terrorizing her was likely a trained operative. Detective Inspector Maria Santos stood before an updated evidence wall that now included detailed profiles of known Russian intelligence operatives, diplomatic personnel, and suspected agents operating in the United Kingdom. The scope of the investigation had expanded exponentially, and the pressure to identify the perpetrators before they could complete their mission had become intense. Dr. Thornfield had remained at the facility overnight, both to provide continued support for Charlotte and to assist with the ongoing analysis of the child's statements. The psychological profile that was emerging from Charlotte's experiences suggested someone who was not only professionally trained in intelligence gathering, but also had specific expertise in psychological manipulation and child psychology. Commander Sarah Williams entered the main briefing room carrying classified documents that had just arrived from MI6 headquarters. Her expression was grim as she approached the central table where the other team members were working. "We've received confirmation from our Moscow station," Commander Williams announced. "The operational terminology that Charlotte overheard matches specific phrases used by the SVR, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. More concerning, we've identified unusual diplomatic activity at the Russian embassy over the past week." D.I. Santos looked up from her analysis. "What kind of activity?" "Encrypted communications traffic has increased significantly, and there have been several unscheduled diplomatic meetings. Our surveillance teams have also noted that several known intelligence operatives have left the country in the past few days. Agent Park activated a secure terminal and began accessing classified intelligence databases. If SVR operatives are evacuating, it suggests that they've either completed their mission or they know that we're closing in on them." Thornfield joined the conversation, bringing with her additional insights from her extended discussions with Charlotte. "There's something else we need to consider." Charlotte mentioned that the intruder became increasingly agitated during their final encounter, the night we discovered the passages. He apparently told her that time was running out and that he needed to get information about something happening soon. Commander Williams felt a chill of apprehension. "Did Charlotte provide any details about what kind of information he was seeking?" "She said he kept asking about the special day when everyone comes to the palace. Based on her description, I believe he was asking about the upcoming state visit by the German Chancellor scheduled for next week." The implications were terrifying. If Russian intelligence operatives had been gathering information about security arrangements for a major state visit, it could indicate plans for an assassination attempt or terrorist attack designed to destabilize relations between Britain and its European allies. Agent Park was already coordinating with the diplomatic security teams responsible for the state visit. "We need to assume that all security arrangements for the Chancellor's visit have been compromised. The information gathered through the palace surveillance could have provided detailed intelligence about protection protocols, route planning, and facility layouts." D.I. Santos began organizing the timeline of evidence they had collected. "If we're right about this, then the entire operation was designed to gather intelligence for a specific attack planned during the state visit. The months of surveillance, the psychological manipulation of Charlotte, and the sophisticated technical equipment all point to extensive preparation for a major operation." Dr. Thornfield was deeply troubled by the realization that Charlotte had unknowingly been providing information that could be used to plan an attack. An 8-year-old child was essentially turned into an intelligence asset through threats and intimidation. The level of psychological manipulation involved shows complete disregard for her well-being. Commander Williams was already making secure phone calls to coordinate with other government agencies. The state visit was scheduled to begin in 5 days, and if they were correct about the Russian plans, time was running out to identify and neutralize the threat. "We need to make a decision about whether to proceed with the state visit as planned or recommend postponement," Commander Williams said after completing her calls. "The political implications of either choice are significant. Agent Park had been reviewing intelligence reports from international partners. Postponing the visit would signal to the Russians that we've discovered their operation, but it would also prevent whatever attack they might be planning. Proceeding with the visit allows us to potentially catch them in the act, but it puts everyone involved at tremendous risk." D.I. Santos was studying surveillance photographs of known Russian operatives in London. "Do we have any leads on who specifically was responsible for the palace intrusions? Based on Charlotte's descriptions and the technical analysis of the surveillance equipment, we've narrowed it down to 3 possible operatives," Agent Park replied. "All 3 are trained in technical surveillance and psychological operations, and all 3 have been in London for the past year." He activated the wall display and showed photographs of 3 men. Each had diplomatic cover at the Russian embassy, but intelligence sources indicated that they were actually SVR operatives with extensive training in covert operations.
Dr. Thornfield studied the photographs. I'd like Charlotte to look at these pictures, but we need to be extremely careful about how we present them. She's already been traumatized enough, and we can't risk re-traumatizing her through the identification process.
Commander Williams nodded. We'll use specialized child identification protocols.
But if Charlotte can identify the person who is terrorizing her, it could provide the evidence we need to take action against the Russian operation. As the team prepared for the identification session, Agent Park received an urgent message on his secure terminal.
After reading it, his expression became even more grave. We have a problem. Our surveillance teams have just lost contact with 2 of the 3 suspects. They appear to have left their usual locations and are no longer under observation.
D.I. Santos felt her heart rate increase. If they've gone underground, it could mean that they're moving to the operational phase of their plan. Or it could mean that they know we're onto them and they're trying to escape the country before we can apprehend them. Commander Williams added.
Dr. Thornfield was already preparing to conduct the identification session with Charlotte. We need to get a positive identification immediately. If these operatives are still in the country and planning an attack, every minute could be critical. The identification session was conducted with extreme care to protect Charlotte's psychological well-being. Specialized child psychologists were present, and the procedure was designed to minimize stress while maximizing the accuracy of any identification.
Charlotte was shown a series of photographs that included the 3 suspects mixed with several other individuals. She was told that she should look at each picture carefully, but that she shouldn't feel pressured to identify anyone unless she was absolutely certain. When Charlotte saw the 3rd photograph, her reaction was immediate and unmistakable. She recoiled from the image and grabbed Dr. Croft, Thornfield's hand.
That's him, she whispered. That's the Shadow Man. The photograph showed Dmitry Volkov, a 38-year-old SVR operative, with extensive training in technical surveillance and psychological operations. According to his file, he had been involved in similar operations in several other countries over the past 5 years. Agent Park immediately activated emergency protocols to locate Volkov. All surveillance teams, we have a positive identification. Subject is Dmitry Volkov, SVR operative with diplomatic cover at the Russian embassy. Consider him extremely dangerous and potentially armed. The response was swift but disappointing. Surveillance teams reported that Volkov had not been seen at his usual locations for over 12 hours. His diplomatic vehicle was parked at the embassy, but embassy officials claimed he was attending meetings at an undisclosed location. D.I. Santos realized that they were racing against time. If Volkov knows we've identified him, he may accelerate whatever plans he has for the state visit. Commander Williams was coordinating with multiple government agencies. We're implementing emergency security protocols for the state visit. All previous arrangements are being modified, and additional protection resources are being deployed. Dr. Thornfield was still with Charlotte, who had become visibly upset after identifying her tormentor. The child was finally beginning to understand the full significance of what had been done to her. Dr. Maggie, Charlotte asked quietly, was the Shadow Man really trying to hurt Mummy and Daddy? Dr. Thornfield chose her words carefully. Some bad people wanted to know things about your family that they weren't supposed to know. But now that we know who they are, we can make sure they can't hurt anyone. Agent Park received another urgent message. This one brought both relief and new concerns. Border security has just intercepted Volkov attempting to leave the country using false identification. He's been taken into custody at Heathrow Airport. D.I. Santos felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. That's excellent news, but we need to assume that he wasn't working alone. If the Russians were planning an operation for the state visit, there may be other operatives still in position. Commander Williams was already coordinating the interrogation arrangements. Volkov is being transferred to a secure facility where intelligence specialists can question him about the scope of the operation and any additional threats. Over the following days, the investigation revealed the full extent of the Russian intelligence operation. Volkov's interrogation, combined with the technical evidence gathered from the palace passages and the intelligence provided by Charlotte, painted a picture of a sophisticated plan to gather information that could be used to plan an attack during the German Chancellor's state visit. The operation had involved months of preparation, including the recruitment of several individuals with access to government facilities and the installation of surveillance equipment at multiple locations throughout London. Charlotte had been targeted not just for information about the royal family, but because children were seen as less likely to report suspicious activities and more susceptible to psychological manipulation. The state visit proceeded under enhanced security arrangements, with no incidents reported. The German Chancellor was briefed on the situation and praised the British intelligence services for their thoroughness in identifying and neutralizing the threat. For Charlotte, the resolution of the case brought both relief and the beginning of a long healing process.
The trauma she had experienced would require ongoing psychological support, but she was finally able to return to a sense of safety and normalcy.
Dr. Thornfield continued to work with Charlotte, helping her process the experiences and understand that she had been incredibly brave in providing the information that helped stop dangerous people from hurting others. The child's resilience and courage had been instrumental in uncovering an international espionage operation that could have had devastating consequences.
The investigation also led to significant changes in royal security protocols and international intelligence sharing arrangements. The sophisticated techniques used by the Russian operatives prompted a comprehensive review of security measures at government facilities throughout the United Kingdom and its allies.
Sergeant Reynolds, Officer Chan, and the other royal protection officers involved in the initial response received commendations for their professionalism and quick thinking. Their decision to take Charlotte's report seriously, despite the initial assumption that they were dealing with childhood nightmares, had ultimately prevented a potential international incident. The hidden passages in Kensington Palace were permanently sealed, and the building underwent comprehensive security upgrades. The royal family was able to return to their residence, confident that new measures were in place to prevent similar intrusions in the future. As for Charlotte, she gradually returned to being a normal 8-year-old princess, though she retained a special bond with the security officers who had helped her during her darkest hours. She occasionally asked Dr. Thornfield about the Shadow Man, but as time passed, the traumatic memories began to fade, replaced by the security of knowing that the adults around her would always take her concerns seriously. The case became a classified study in international intelligence operations, child psychology, and security protocol development. But for those who lived through those terrifying 5 hours when Charlotte's scream suddenly stopped, it would always be remembered as the night when a brave little girl helped save not just her own family, but potentially prevented an international crisis that could have changed the course of European relations.
The silence that had once been so frightening had finally given way to safety, justice, and the knowledge that even the most sophisticated threats could be overcome when dedicated professionals worked together to protect the innocent.